call to order the Wednesday, December 20th, 2023 meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals to order. May I have a roll call, please?
You may. Ms. Chester? Mr. Cho? Ms. McLaughlin?
Here.
Mr. Roosh?
Here.
Ms. Uckman? Mr. Warmbrun?
Here.
And Mr. Welch?
Here, we have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are none.
At this time, I would swear any member of the audience who wishes to give testimony, please stand and raise your right hand. Swear or affirm that any testimony you give tonight will be true and accurate to the best of your belief? Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are none.
This time, then, we will take up the minutes of the previous meeting. Have all members had opportunity to review those minutes? If so, entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
It's been moved. Is there a second to that? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Minutes are approved. Are there any continued public hearings?
There are none.
At this time, then, we will call for hearing ZBA 2023-C-07, a request by Wes Taylor on behalf of PK Elledge Development LLC for a conditional use permit to allow a self-storage facility at 1601 East Colorado Avenue in the B3 General Business Zoning District. May we have a staff report, please? Can you hold on for just a second? At this time, I will indicate the method of procedure for this public hearing. We will obviously open the public hearing. Staff will present a summary of the case. Zoning board members can ask questions of the staff. The applicant makes a statement and presents evidence. Zoning board members ask questions of the applicant. Proponents make statements. Board members can question those proponents. Opponents can make statements. Board members can question those opponents. A rebuttal by the applicant. Rebuttal by the objectors. Applicant makes a final statement. The zoning board discusses the case. Then the zoning board makes a motion and votes on the case. Thank you. May we have a staff report, please?
Good evening. PK Elledge Development requests a conditional use permit to build a self-storage facility at 1601 East Colorado Avenue. Self-storage facilities are permitted with a conditional use permit in the B3 General Business District. Staff received no public input on this request and recommend the ZBA approve the permit, finding that the conditional use criteria have been met. The property has been farmed since at least as early as 1940. The site is approximately 2.7 acres located on the south side of Colorado Avenue, east of Philo Road. It is surrounded by a mix of agricultural, commercial, institutional, and residential uses. You can see the Reiner Wyckoff Funeral Home and the Grace Quest Church, as well as a self-storage warehouse to the south and the north, as well as pharmacy, dentist, and other commercial uses to the north. There's also assisted living and single-family homes and duplexes to the east, and supported living and apartment residential to the northeast. Here's a street view looking south towards the property. You can see the multi-use path along the south side of Colorado. And then here is an aerial looking down and south onto the property. There's additional farmland to the south of this. The property is zoned B3 general business and surrounded by a mix of business and single-family and multifamily zoning districts. The comprehensive plan designates this land for future community business uses, which are defined as those that are designed to serve the overall community as well as the immediate neighborhood, but are less intense than regional commercial centers. They are located along principal arterial routes or at major intersections, and they contain a variety of business and service uses at scales and intensities that make them generally compatible with surrounding neighborhoods. Looking at the concept plan that was submitted with the exhibit, I'll zoom in a little bit for your benefit. The proposed self-storage facility would consist of 4 one-story buildings. The site would be accessible to tenants from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week. Nearby businesses are open 6 or 7 days a week with a mix of operating hours, either of daytime, 9 to 2, or 9 to 5, and expanded 8 to 9. There's a range of hours because there's a church, and there's a funeral home, as well as self-storage facilities and a pharmacy, and the assisted living center. As with standard automated self-storage facilities, staff would be available to assist tenants during these hours by telephone. Access would be provided through an automated secured gate. According to the applicant, no outdoor storage would be permitted. So here you can see the 4 long buildings of drive-up units as well as 1 climate-controlled unit. Access is typically gained from an interior hallway. And these are some elevations showing that the height of the buildings would be 10 feet. And here is a proposed rendering of the building. It is identical to the style that you saw at a previous conditional use permit application. The complex would be include a mix of drive-up and climate-controlled units with a mix of 25 square foot units and 100 square foot units, all 10 feet tall. According to the concept plan, the buildings would be set back 35 feet from the front property line and 44 feet from the west property line and around 90 feet from the east property line. It also shows a stormwater detention pond. The facility would require a solid 6 foot tall wood or masonry fence along the east side and a 5 foot deep landscape buffer along the south rear yard because the adjacent properties are residentially zoned. Prior to any construction, the Land Development Code would require the applicant to go through the minor development process, which would require a plat of survey and a stormwater management plan to be submitted for review by city staff. The preliminary site plan generally conforms to Urbana's zoning regulations, and any potential issues would be addressed in the final site plans, which would be reviewed by city staff for zoning and building code compliance during the building permit process. I have here on the screen the criteria, the 3 criteria for conditional use permit. Staff found that it met all 3 criteria. The proposed facility's location would be convenient to the public to access, as it is located on Colorado Avenue, just 1 block east of Philo Road. Many of the administrative activities for the proposed use will be performed online, reducing some traffic to the site. City staff have recently heard concerns about the abundance of self-storage units in Urbana. From an economic development perspective, this is due to a combination of demand and the availability of inexpensive land. In the recent proposals considered by the ZBA, as in this case, the land in question has been undeveloped for an extended period of time. Therefore, the concern that the proposed self-storage units would be displacing other viable uses is minimal. This property's been farmed since before the 1940s. Secondly, the proposed self-storage facility is designed, located, and would be operated to not be injurious to the district or to the public welfare. The facility will be automated to operate during the hours of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. The facility, the development will have a perimeter fence and security cameras for extra security for the tenants and neighbors. No outdoor storage would be permitted. Staff do not anticipate a significant increase in traffic relative to the existing business and residential uses nearby, and it would generate less traffic than other potential uses that are permitted by right in the B3 district. The proposed facility would be screened from the east and south residential districts. Stormwater, outdoor lighting, and building plans would all be reviewed for code compliance prior to a building permit being issued. Finally, staff find the proposed use to be generally compatible with the character of the neighborhood, as the site and neighborhood property are designated for future community business use and contain a variety of personal service, food, and retail uses. The applicant has requested no additional special permits or variances, and the proposed self-storage facility would conform to all other development requirements for the B3 zoning district. The findings are summarized in the staff report and closely follow the criteria analysis. I am happy to answer any questions regarding them. The board must provide findings of fact in their decision, and they may provide their own findings or refer to staff findings. Here, those staff findings are shown on the screen. Staff recommends that the Zoning Board of Appeals approve the proposed conditional use in case ZBA 2023 C07 with the following conditions: that the self-storage facility generally conform to the attached concept plan, and that the self-storage facility's operating hours shall be between the hours of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. That is the end of the staff report. I'm happy to answer questions, and Mr. Taylor, who is the principal of PK Elledge Development LLC, is also here to answer questions.
Are there any questions for staff? Go ahead.
Okay, so there's a fence around this entire property.
That is what is proposed.
Okay, and the one side is a solid 6-foot fence. What are the other 3 sides?
Whatever the applicant would like to provide. A fence is not required on the other 3 sides. It is required on the east side because of the differing zoning district. It's, I think, R2 to the east. The south is R4, so the 5-foot landscaping buffer is required there.
How deep is the average stormwater detention pond?
That is all calculated by the city engineer based on the impervious area that's being drained off the site prior to and after development. The applicant has pre-calculated that this size should meet it. However, that has not been reviewed by the city engineer. We did discuss this at an interdepartmental meeting, and no strong concerns were stated at that point. But it would be properly reviewed for sizing and detention by the city engineer prior to any building permits being issued.
Or is something like this something that we should have fenced off? I mean, if we're not gonna pose any type of criteria on the fencing on 3 sides, you know, I guess what I'm thinking is some child or several children probably go through some type of a fence and get in a pond and get in some sort of trouble.
The city's recently adopted manual of practice actually prohibits fencing off of detention ponds.
It prohibits fencing off the detention
Yes.
ponds.
Yes, that it is considered a safety issue for, I assume, people not being able to get out of it. But at the recently discussed planned unit development, that was, you know.
So we're not worried about them getting in, we're worried about them getting out.
Correct.
Okay.
And in this case, the applicant proposes to install a security fence. Even on residential subdivisions, you know, the stormwater detention ponds are not required to be fenced off unless there would be some other requirement, such as building code, that would require a fence. So we are only worrying about the zoning ordinance at this point, and all of the other building codes and engineering codes would be taken up by the relevant city agencies.
Are there any additional questions for staff? Thank you. The applicant wishes to be heard. I'm sure you're familiar with the routine, but please sign in and state your name for the record.
Wes Taylor, I'm with PK Elledge. To speak to Mr. Warmburn's, a couple of your things. So we are planning a fence all the way around the property. The main thing would be that on the east side, it would have to be a different style fence than what we would propose on the other three sides. To the south, it would be a landscape buffer, but we would still have a fence there. On the east, it would be an opaque fence because it has to act as a screening. But we would have a fence that would keep people who aren't there for to visit their storage unit. There would be a fence there to keep them out. The other thing is, when we talked to our civil engineer about the stormwater management, the civil engineering, and all those aspects of this particular development at this location, I believe the detention will be a dry basin, so there actually won't be, water for somebody to get in and that would pose a risk. It would just be a detention basin that basically is meant to handle the storm water that runs through that property. Because right now, as Mr. Ricci stated, the land has been farmed for a long, long time, years and years and years. So the drainage right now, and this development happened actually prior to the code where city began to enforce stormwater detention or stormwater retention planning on developments. So the properties that surround it, the assisted living has a detention pond over in where the like the townhouses are at. But to the west side, the drainage for those properties, there's no detention basin. It runs through a swale on this property. So as a part of our stormwater management, we would be required actually to manage that stormwater as well, which is, I believe, the main reason for the detention basin, is that we have to not only handle, the stormwater that we would maybe produce, but whatever drainage is currently going through that property now because it's been vacant for so long.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you, Board.
Is there any member of the audience that wishes to be heard in favor of the application? Hearing none. Are there any members of the audience who wish to be heard in opposition to the application? Hearing none. I assume you have nothing further to add as a final statement. The applicant, I'm sorry. No. All right. Does the board wish to discuss this request? No? All right, then. At this time, then, we are at the point where we have a motion in regards to ZBA 2023-C-07.
In the case of ZBA 2023-C-07, I move that we approve the proposed conditional use with the following conditions. One, the self-storage facility shall generally conform to the attached concept plan, and two, the self-storage facility's operating hours shall be between the hours of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Are we prepared to vote?
Before there's a vote, could we get some findings of fact, or at least a discussion of some findings of fact?
Sure. The reasoning behind my proposal is because I believe that this proposed unit is conducive to the public convenience at the location. It will serve the people who want this kind of business. I believe that the proposed unit is designed, located, and proposed to be operated so that it will not be unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the district in which it shall be located. And that the proposed use conforms to the applicable regulations and standards of, and preserves the essential character of the district in which it shall be located.
Are we now then prepared for vote?
Okay, Ms. Chester?
Yes.
Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roosh?
Yes.
Mr. Wormbrun?
Yes.
And Mr. Welch?
Yes, that motion carries. Thank you. We now call for hearing ZBA-2023-C-06, a request for a conditional use permit to allow duplex. ZBA 2023-Major-03, a request for a major variance to reduce the required front yard along Illinois Street from 15 to 9 feet, reduce the minimum open space ratio from 0.4 to 0, and increase the maximum floor area ratio from 0.4 to 0.52. ZBA 2023-Major-04, a request for a major variance to reduce the required lot area for duplex from 6,000 to 3607 square feet, and reduce the required number of parking spaces for a duplex from 4 to 2. And ZBA 2023-Minimum-03, a request for a minor variance to reduce the required front yard along Birch Street from 15 to 12 feet. These are requests by Chen Yu Chen, and I apologize for any pronunciation, and Pei Su Tan regarding 312 West Illinois Street in the R2 Single Family Residential Zoning District. The following are a series of related requests, all for the same property. Staff will present all of the cases in one report. May we have a staff report, please?
Yes, you may. And I will say that this is probably the most complex case I've ever presented. Highly intense for a small bit of land, so follow along. The property contains a single-family home which has been condemned and permitted for demolition. The conditional use permit is to allow a duplex, and there are multiple variances to allow either a single-family home or a duplex at this site. The house is legally non-conforming. The condemned and permitted to be demolished house is legally non-conforming as it encroaches into the front yards and exceeds both the maximum floor area ratio and the minimum open space ratio. The lot itself is also legally non-conforming due to its size. So any new dwelling would likely require some combination of variances for lot area, yards, open space, floor area ratio, and parking. For convenience, the variances have been grouped into two sets. One that would be required to allow either a single-family home or a duplex in the same location as the existing house, and one with additional variances that would be required specifically to allow a duplex. Separating the cases this way will make it easier to process the cases, since some of the requests are contingent upon the board's vote on the conditional use permit request to allow a variance. Okay, so the first case is the duplex use, conditional use permit. The Urbana zoning ordinance allows a duplex with a conditional use permit in the R2 zoning district. The first major variance case 03 and minor variance case 03 address reduced yards, open space ratio, and the floor area ratio. The Urbana zoning ordinance requires principal structures in the R2 district to have a minimum front yard of 15 to 25 feet based on the average of the front yards of the existing lots on the block face. For this corner lot, the minimum required yards is 15 feet. The proposed duplex would have a 9-foot front yard along Illinois Street. This is a 40% reduction from that 15-foot requirement, and that requires a major variance. And it would have a 12-foot front yard along Birch Street, which is a 20% reduction and requires only a minor variance. Anything less than 25% is a minor variance. The zoning ordinance also requires a minimum open space ratio of 0.4 and a maximum allowed floor area ratio of 0.4. The proposed dwelling would have an open space ratio of 0, and we'll get into that a little later, which is a 100% reduction, which requires a major variance. And it would have an FAR of 0.52, a 30% increase over that 0.4, also requiring a major variance. And then getting down into the second, and let me back up. The minimum variance that is lumped in here is because the Birch Street variance is only a 3-foot variance. So that's where the minor 03 comes in. Then getting into the second major variance, which is about lot area. The zoning ordinance allows a single-family dwelling on a lot of any size if it was platted prior to 1950, if it meets all other development regulations. In this case, the proposed house would not meet a lot of regulations, but the variances that are being requested would make it meet those development regulations. So the single-family dwelling, if you wanted to rebuild it on this lot, would not require a lot variance. However, the zoning ordinance requires a minimum lot area of 6,000 square feet for duplexes on parcels in the R2 district that were platted before 1970. This lot has an area of 3,600 square feet. So it has 40% less area than required, and a major variance would then be required. Okay, so if you want to allow a single-family home on the lot, you do not need a lot area variance. If you want to allow a duplex on the lot, it would need a lot variance, a lot area variance. For the conditional use permit and the minor variance applications, the board may vote to approve with conditions, or deny each application. For the major variance application, the board may recommend approval to City Council by a 2/3 majority vote, or approval with conditions to City Council by a 2/3 majority vote, or deny the request. In each of the applications, the board should either accept the specific staff findings or articulate their own specific findings based on that applicant's criteria. Staff recommend that the ZBA approve the conditional use permit and minor variance and forward a recommendation to City Council to approve the 2 major variances. That's the longest preamble I've ever made. You're welcome. The applicants purchased the property in 2021 with the intention of converting it back into a duplex, as the existing floor plan of 2 entrances and 2 exit doors and a separating wall led them to believe that that duplex use was permitted. The house was built in 1878 and needed to be renovated. They later learned from their architect and structural engineer that existing termite damage was too extensive to be repaired. The applicants would like to build a duplex that would not be out of character with the neighborhood. The property is located at the northeast corner of West Illinois Street and Birch Street. It has a 1.5-story house with a 1-car detached garage accessing Birch Street. This is the yellow caution tape denoting that it's been condemned and you shouldn't walk around it. The property and surrounding property are zoned R2, single-family residential. The land uses are primarily single-family homes with a few duplexes and apartment buildings. The property and surrounding property are designated for future residential use with mixed residential 1 block north. Moving into the discussion, the applicants would like to build a 2-story duplex of 1,890 square feet. It would be built on the footprint of the existing 1.5-story house, which is 910 square feet. These are the applicant's submitted plans. You can see, staff checked the dimensions. It is 4.5 feet from the Illinois Street sidewalk, and it's 12 feet from the Birch Street sidewalk. So it's already a non-conforming because of the required yards. Slide 8 shows the proposed floor plan. They actually removed the bump out on the south side, so now the yard there goes from 4 foot 6 feet to 9 feet. It is still non-conforming, but it is less of a non-conformity than it was before. The west yard remains unchanged. The garage does not get touched in this proposal. Comparing these two, so the black is the current floor plan, the red is the proposed floor plan. You can see the shift from a 4 foot 6 required yard to a 9 foot required yard. You can see that they actually plan to expand the footprint 1 foot to the east into what would be the rear yard. That yard is not non-conforming, so they're not creating any new non-conformities as far as yards go. The proposed floor plan, which is not actually part of today's request at all, but it gives you an idea of what they're planning on doing, shows that each of the 2 dwelling units would have a living room, kitchen, and half bath and utility room on the first floor, and 2 bedrooms and a full bath on the second floor. And okay. The lot was part of Lot 19 of Rose 3rd Edition, platted in 1852. At some date, the 6 lower tier lots, 19 through I think 25, were split into thirds to create lots that were 58 feet wide, creating the new configuration of 3,600 square foot lots, a lot size that later became non-conforming for any duplex once the city adopted its zoning ordinance in 1940. The property is located in an older residential neighborhood with many other non-conforming lots and uses. The city's West Urbana non-conforming use inventory shows 7 duplexes in a 1 block radius, 3 of which are on lots below the current minimum lot area requirements. This was not an exhaustive analysis. This was simply looking at that map and looking at the lot areas of some of the lots in the area. The applicants submitted a city historical survey for the property from the year 2000, suggesting that the existing building had housed a multifamily use during the 1950s and again from 1974 to 1999. Those are the red blocked areas. Current staff have no idea what the methodology is of this, but certainly we have apparently names of families next to multifamily designations and what years, and again through the 1970s and again in 1999. Its most recent use in the city's rental registration program was as a single-family residence. A 1975 certificate of occupancy did authorize the use of the existing building as a 1 or 2 family dwelling. However, because the most recent use has been as a single-family residence for longer than 6 months, any past legally conforming use as a duplex in the R2 zoning district without a conditional use permit has expired, which makes them need to come and ask for one. Moving into, and so we will show you again the comparison floor plan. Red is new, black is old. We shift a little bit out of the Illinois Street front yard, and other than that, and the 1-foot expansion to the east, the footprint remains the same. It is not an expansion of any encroachments into front yards or other required yards. The existing home encroaches into the required 15-foot front yard along Birch Street by 3 feet and into the required 15-foot front yard along West Illinois Street by 10 feet 6 inches. The applicants request a reduction of 3 feet for the former, which would match the existing conditions, and of 9 feet for the minimum front yard along Illinois Street, which would be slightly less than the existing conditions. Actually, quite a bit less, or 5 feet. The proposed duplex would reduce the existing encroachment by 4 feet 6 inches. Many other homes in the surrounding area also predate minimum yard requirements and encroach further than current regulations would allow, some more so than the proposed duplex. The applicant demonstrated this with a satellite image showing other setbacks in the area. So I'm going to just zoom in a little bit. You can see that other houses are certainly not meeting the 15-foot setback. I personally confirm that the setbacks for properties along this block face of Illinois, the north side where this house is, range from 1 foot from the sidewalk to 12 feet from the sidewalk and average 6 feet. That average is 60% less than the current requirement of 15 feet. The applicants, moving into the open space ratio, the applicants request the reduction of the minimum required open space ratio from 0.4 to 0, which would be no different than the current open space ratio of the existing house, which is also 0. That's because that even though the current site layout, which you can see a bit here, provides quite a bit of green space in that 12-foot front yard on the west and the east rear yard and in the green space between the garage and the house. But the zoning ordinance requires any green space to be a minimum dimension of 15 feet by 15 feet or 225 square feet before it is allowed to be counted towards that minimum open space fulfillment. So both the current house and the proposed house have a 0.0 open space ratio, with the fact that they are actually setting the house back 4 feet 6 inches from Illinois Street and only expanding to the east by 1 foot. I would speculate that the open space that would be provided would actually be more than what is currently being provided now. The coming back from Illinois Street is more than the additional that they're going eastward. If the unpaved areas were evaluated without regard to minimum dimensions, the site would provide 1,200 square feet of open space and yield an open space ratio of 0.63, which is well above the minimum required open space ratio of 0.4. So it's simply that additional requirement that any chunk be at least 15 feet by 15 feet that makes the current house and the proposed structure out of conformity. Moving into the floor to area ratio, the applicants request an increase in the maximum FAR from 0.4 to 0.52. The existing home is 1,468 feet, which also gives it an FAR of 0.41, which is slightly exceeding the 0.4 maximum. So even the existing single-family home is above the maximum floor area ratio. If one were to rebuild this exact same property, you would still need a variance because the 0.41 is more than 0.4. The proposed duplex would be 1,890 square feet, 28% larger than the current structure, which is due to it being a full two-story construction rather than being a story and a half. Although the proposed FAR would deviate more than the existing building from the requirement, the building footprints and massing would be similar. It is likely that many of the buildings in this area that predate the zoning ordinance exceed current FAR requirements. Moving into the parking request. The applicants request a reduction in the required parking for a duplex from 4 spaces to 2 spaces. The property currently has 2 spaces, one in the one-car garage and one in the access drive. The applicants have submitted photos at different times of day to show the availability of street parking on Birch Street and Illinois Street, and they also mention nearby bus routes. I visited the site several times and observed very few cars parked on both Illinois and Birch Streets during the day. This was in the morning, at lunchtime, around 4 o'clock, even on a Saturday. And it averaged 4 to 5 cars total on the 4 blocks adjacent to the property, east, west, and north and south, which is probably at least 16 parking spaces. So probably 25% occupancy on average. That's not to say that at other times there's more parking being used, but at other times there might be less parking being used. The property is within the West Urbana Special Parking Zone, where residents may apply for on-street parking permits. The applicants stated they would purchase permits for tenants when requested. Permit data shows just 2 parking permits issued for the 14 homes on the 300 block of West Illinois Street, which is kind of an indication that people aren't especially, I won't speculate. I'm sorry. It's also worth noting that the property has been used as a duplex in the past with the current layout, which is a 1-car garage and 1 parking space in the access drive. This is a potential building rendering that the applicant submitted. It is not tied to a site plan or to the application. It's just simply potentially one rendering that would give that 1,890 square foot 2-bedroom per dwelling unit configuration. The staff report reviewed the proposal against the 3 permit criteria and determined that it met all 3 criteria. I would be happy to go and answer questions about those if you'd like. Hitting some highlights, the proposed duplex's location would be convenient to the public to access as it is located at the intersection of Birch and West Illinois Street. It's in the West Urbana neighborhood, which is known for being one of the most walkable neighborhoods in Urbana. Secondly, that the proposed use will be similar to the existing one and would be no more injurious or detrimental to the district or the public welfare. The proposed duplex would replace a single-family home that has been condemned due to extreme insect damage, and it would be built on the footprint of the existing home. And finally, that the staff find the proposed duplex to be generally compatible with the character of the neighborhood, which is primarily single-family homes with scattered duplexes and apartment buildings. When I toured the site, I found that with these, with the lot configuration that these lower tiered lots had, where they were actually 3rd splits of lots, all the houses on the north side of Illinois in the 300 and 400 blocks were fairly small in size, because the lots were smaller. The houses on the south side, because they were on full-size lots, tended to be much larger because the lots are larger. The 312 West Illinois house was probably the smallest house along this block face of West Illinois Street. The proposed house, even with the 28% increase in floor area, would be kind of a salt box that would, fill up 2/3 of the lot with green space around it. Actually, sorry, 0.5, I believe, of the lot. But it's still a 2-story house. There are 3-story houses on the south side of West Illinois Street. So as far as being out of place in the neighborhood, I don't find that to be the case. It might be larger than what was there on that lot to begin with. Okay. Moving into the variance criteria, they are listed on the screen. Going into the staff review, the requested yard, open space, and floor area ratio variances will not serve as a special privilege because they are necessary due to the extremely small size of the lot, which was platted in 1852 prior to the adoption of the zoning ordinance. The home and the lot became legally nonconforming upon adoption of the ordinance in 1940. The parking variance will not serve as a special privilege because the lot is very small. The house has been used as a duplex previously without any known issues, and the amount of parking is similar to several other duplexes in the neighborhood. The second variance criteria, the requested variances are to remedy situations created prior to the applicant's purchase of the home in 2021, at which time they believed the home could be converted back into a duplex. The requested yard, open space, and floor area variances would allow for a single-family home or a duplex to continue on this substandard lot, and the parking variance would allow the duplex use to be reestablished with 2 parking spaces, which is the same amount of parking it had when it was a duplex in the past. Third, the proposed duplex would be consistent with the essential character of the neighborhood, as it would be of similar size and style to nearby conforming and non-conforming single-family homes and duplexes. Fourth, rebuilding the existing single-family home or building a duplex is unlikely to create a nuisance at this time or in the future. In addition, not granting the variances would cause a nuisance to the neighborhood as it would leave a vacant, essentially undevelopable lot at a street corner. Fifth, the requested variances will allow rebuilding of the existing single-family home or the proposed duplex in the same location as the existing home and will bring the property into conformity with the Urbana zoning ordinance. Moving into the public input section, staff published a legal ad in the News Gazette and sent letters to 47 neighboring property owners and posted a sign on the property. Staff received 8 letters of support for the duplex conditional use permit and all variances, 3 letters of objection for the duplex conditional use permit and duplex variances, but not necessarily for the single-family use variances. People often did not clarify what they were in support of. And also 3 letters of objection for the duplex conditional use permit and all variances. After the packet went out, we received 3 new letters and a revision to a previous letter. 2 of those letters were in favor of the duplex permit and all variances, and 2 of them were in favor of the single-family variances. Moving into the summary of findings, the duplex would be conducive to the public convenience at this location based on its proximity to downtown Urbana and the U of I, its connectivity with the transit and bicycling network, and its compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood. The duplex would not be injurious or detrimental to the surrounding district or the public welfare, as it would conform with the surrounding neighborhood and would comply with the standards and regulations of and preserve the essential character of the neighborhood. and the duplex would be generally compatible with the character of the neighborhood, which is primarily single-family homes with scattered duplexes and apartment buildings. That is the conditional use permit findings. The report goes on to talk about the findings, staff findings for the major and minor variance. They basically restate the staff analysis of the variance criteria, that they would not serve as a special privilege. They're not the result of a situation knowingly created by the applicant. They would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, and they would not create a nuisance to the adjacent property owners, and they are the minimum deviation necessary to meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance. That's for major variance 3 and minor variance 3. And then finally, similarly for major ordinance 4, the findings were essentially the same. The staff recommendation is that the Zoning Board of Appeals approve the proposed conditional use in ZBA 2023 C06 and the proposed minor variance in case ZBA 2023 Min 03. And likewise, staff recommends the Zoning Board of Appeals recommend approval of the proposed major variances in cases ZBA 2020 Major 03 and Major 04 to the Urbana City Council. And then we would simply take each vote in turn. First, the conditional use permit, and then for major 03 and minor 03, and then do major 04 because that's the duplex variance. If you vote no on the conditional use permit for the duplex conditional use permit, you don't need to take a vote on the final major variance case. That's the end of my report. I'm happy to answer questions, and Mr. Chen is here to answer questions as well.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
I have a question. In this neighborhood, at one point, there were numbers of single-family homes that had been converted to duplexes or threeplexes. And they were required, if it had been done after 1954, to return to their original single-family use. You knew that, right?
I was not familiar with that.
Oh, it was a very big deal.
I can imagine.
It was a huge deal, and a lot of houses that had been converted had to be returned to single-family use. So and if you drive around, you can see some of them. You can actually see that they were duplexes and they had to be returned. And I don't remember, there was a court case, probably was something, but I think this was in the 1980s.
Okay.
So my question is, if this is now a single-family house,
Yes.
because it was not a duplex many years. So if I had a single-family house in this neighborhood, could I petition to have it become a duplex?
Yes. Because a duplex is permitted with a conditional use permit in the R2 zoning district.
So what does that have to do with what happened before, when they had so these were done without conditional use permits?
Presumably.
Yes, they were just done.
Okay.
And they were forced to return
Okay.
because it was basically zoned single-family. Now, what is it now?
Single family, R2 single family residential district, which permits a duplex with a conditional use if the justifications can be made and a conditional use permit can be obtained from the
But
zoning
would you
board.
be making those kind of statements that you made here? Or,
We're not going to speculate on that. We take things on a case-by-case basis.
all right. Okay.
Any additional questions for staff? Thank you. The applicant wishes to be heard.
Good evening, board. I'm Chen Yu, and I'm one of the applicants. The other one, she's not here right now, so.
I think you should go to the other. Is the green?
Hello? That's better. So I'm Chen Yu, and I'm one of the applicants. And I'm here to answer your questions. So to address one of the question that you have right before for the staff about converting the duplex back to single family. So I know that there are rentals registration required for a BENA, and under it there's a single family. You can register as a single family or duplex. So I'm not exactly too sure what was required to return a duplex back to a single family when the rentals registration also allows for a duplex. So would you clarify on what you were asking? Because I was not too sure which court case that you're talking about.
I think she was referring to an effort back in the 1980s where I believe the planning staff surveyed all of the houses in the neighborhood and took, I guess, illegally converted duplexes or more than that and required them to return back to single family.
Okay, yeah, okay, sure. So I guess what I'm proposing is that by actually applying for a duplex, we can construct the house as a duplex by law, which means that it would be built by the duplex standard. So, because I've been living in the area for many years, and I do know many of those houses were converted into duplex. I would not say illegally, but it's not conforming to the required building code. So, like, the interior wall is not up to code with the fire code. If we can get the approval to build it, it's going to be built under the required code for duplex. So I think that would be a good, that would be a plus. Another thing is we are building as essentially on the same footprint as what it is right now. The only change that we have is by making it a real two-story instead of 1.5, because right now it's on one side it's 2-story, and on the other side, the additional side was 1-story. So that would be the only major change that we'll be making. So.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions for the applicant? Hearing none. Thank you. Is there any member of the audience that wishes to be heard in favor of the applications? Hearing none. I'm sorry.
Could you sign in, please?
Sign
Thanks.
in.
Over here again, or? All right. Hear me? Hi, I'm Dan Davis. I live at 307 West High. It's kind of catty-corner behind the proposed site. I can see the house from about 10 of my windows, so I'm pretty invested in the outcome of this. What's going on there now is just terrible. It's an eyesore. With the caution tape, it's definitely not great for property values as it is. And I worry that this is one of the few opportunities that we would have to significantly improve that area. If this falls through and you have to kind of recreate it as it is, and you're going to have to go through the variances anyway, so I don't think it really saves much friction to keep it as it is, which really isn't working for anybody. There's 3 little houses in a row right there on Birch. They all are severely undersized for the neighborhood. So having at least one of those taken care of would get, like anytime you see 3 in a row, it sets a tone for the neighborhood. So I think this would improve the overall tenor as you travel into the Illinois Street corridor from Birch. It doubles the setback from Illinois in front and gets rid of that ugly bump out. And instead, if you are going to encroach right up onto the sidewalk, the best way to do that is a porch, and that's indeed the most proud feature of the new proposed plan. So it's a lot of improvements from walkability and from sightline as you're going down to Illinois, which I think is the more important part than Birch, obviously. Yeah, so I would just emphatically like to support this plan and wish that everyone approve everything and that we can get this going, because it's kind of like it's like kind of an embarrassment how it is like currently, and I think we can do a lot better. This is way better. It gives us a little bit more density in this nice neighborhood without having some huge out-of-town acronym come in and develop this thing out from underneath us. It's owner-occupied, so a lot of the concerns I would have in a rental situation are going to be ameliorated by having the actual owner on site rather than just managed by some company or something. So it's really like a really good opportunity, and I don't know that we could formulate something better as a neighborhood if we all like tried to, and that he's willing to put the work up. It looks good. It's not any bigger than a lot of there's some really huge houses there, frankly, so I don't think it's going to be shadowing over anyone's or blocking solar or anything like that. So I don't really see a whole lot of downsides, and I see a whole lot of upsides, and I would strongly encourage everybody to approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Hold on. Are there any questions of the proponent? Hearing none. Now you may go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard in favor of the applications? Hearing none is, I'm sorry, there. Yeah, sir, I'm gonna have to swear you in.
Have to swear me?
Swear you in, yes. You swear or affirm that any testimony you give will be true and accurate to the best of your belief. Thank you.
My name's Danny Otto. I live at 405 West Illinois, about 175 feet from the subject property. And I spend a lot of time on my front porch, so I've watched the property decay over the years since 2004 when we acquired our house, which is one of those houses that has a conditional use permit. So the original maid's quarter in the basement is a legal apartment. We took the house from being a rooming house, and we've met many people when there were 18 people living in the house. So now we have our family on the first, second, and third floor and a rental below. I saw this subject property decay over the years since 2004. In the early years, there was some maintenance. The house was repainted. It seemed to be well managed. But in recent years, it's been vacant for a long period of times, and then short-term renters, and then vacant. So I was quite happy this summer. My wife and I had been away, and we returned, and we saw the dumpster and work being done on it, and then all of a sudden the tapes and the condemnation. And so walking by one day, we met the owner of the property, and I said, I have experience with these projects, you know, what's going on? And so we spent time inside looking at it. And I'm not a professional, but as a hobbyist, I have restored and renovated 8 homes, including 4 in the Wuna district, one of them being my own home. And so I thought that I had never seen a home that couldn't be salvaged. And I took a good hard look at it, and I saw the extensive termite damage. And I was still willing to think that someone with more energy than me could make it work. So I put him in touch with a contractor, and the 2 of us spent time in there, and then a 3rd person spent time in there 8 hours. And they said that the termite damage is just too far. There's no place to start. So it's sad because that's a historic home, I think 1878. Some of the beams are wood hewn. You can see the axe marks on it, but there's nothing to be done to save that home. So when a week ago he came presenting the scheme of what he's planning, I think it fits into the neighborhood. He's fitting it onto the footprint of the house. He's increasing the setback on Illinois. So earlier this week I went down that block measuring the setbacks. And so 302 at the east end of the house, 5 feet to the first plane. 304, 5 feet, 306, 5 feet 6 inches, 308, 5 feet, 310, 9 feet. 312, the subject property was 5 feet, the way it is now. So I think he's proposing to increase that to 9 feet, which would be equivalent to the maximum setback of any other house on that street. Because it's going to be a full 2-story, it does look somewhat more imposing than the house there. But if you look at the house immediately across the street, that would be 402 West Illinois. It's a massive house. It's a full 2-story, built in the times when 2 stories had 10-foot ceilings, so that even with his plan, the house immediately to the west across the street will be of a larger scale than what he's proposing. Parking has been raised as an issue. It's just a tough thing to deal with. He proposes to use the garage as parking, so I think that it should be specified it be available as parking and not be used for some other sort of use. But I, for one, will be happy to see that corner addressed in a way with a quality structure. And I encourage you to grant the variances necessary to make this happen.
Any questions for the opponent? Thank you, sir. Anyone else in favor of the proposed applications? Hearing no one else, anyone in the audience who wishes to be heard in opposition to the proposed applications?
Mr. Chair, I have some written communications that I would like to read, if I may.
Hold on, we'll get to you in just a moment.
Okay.
Go on.
So we received this at the beginning of the meeting. This is from a Lauren Senoff from the 300 block of West Illinois Street. So Ms. Senoff says, I'm opposed to the request for all 3 variant requests at 312 West Illinois. And then some bullet points. The importance of preservation of neighborhood character, no architectural drawings except a cut and paste idea, increased congestion and density, traffic and parking issues. Illinois Street has serious problems due to street parking and high car speeds. Traffic often does not slow down, nor is caution exercised when reduced to 1 lane due to parked cars. My household had 2 vehicles totaled, and my neighbor had 1 car totaled as a result of drivers plowing into them when parked on Illinois Street. With increased density of a duplex, what might the impact be on the sewage system? Question of the proposed variance changes. I am concerned about the precedents that would be established if these variances are granted. Zoning laws state that a duplex footprint would shift from 6,000 required square feet to 3,607 square feet. Since 2021, the existing property has been an eyesore on Illinois Street, and improvement is much needed. However, settling for a quick resolution is not in the best interest of the neighborhood, and specifically to Illinois and Birch Streets. The business of building for rental income must not encroach into breaking required variances.
Thank you. You may come forward. I don't believe you were not sworn in as well. Swear or affirm that any testimony you give will be true and accurate to the best of your belief. Sign in, please.
Thank you. I also live on the 300 block across the street. Sure, Evelyn Shapiro. I'm on the 300 block of Illinois. And I have some concerns about the number of variances that we're looking at. If we were just talking about a single-family home replacing the same footprint, I don't think I would be as concerned as I am about the idea of the duplex. I don't, from my conversation with the owner, I don't actually believe it's going to be owner occupied. I believe he told me he was going to stay in his house, which is at the other end of town, and actually rent out both. That was what I understood in our conversation. I also understood that he intends to use the garage as a ceramic studio, not as a parking. So we're actually talking about a proposed duplex with actually one effective parking spot. So I don't feel confident in those parts of the petition request. And they're kind of hinged, those two things are kind of important for what we're talking about. And the setback, I love the idea of that bump out not being there and the setback being more aligned with other houses along the way. But the covered porch actually is going to be its own bump out. So the setback will be 5 feet, not actually 9 feet if we go to the edge of the covered portion, if you look at the map. So it's just kind of interesting the way we were talking about those setbacks. What is the actual setback and how we look at that in terms of a footprint. I also feel like maybe people have been talking about this, but the sidewalk obstruction's been a huge issue in the last year and a half, and I know that, Mr. Chen's not responsible for that, but I feel as a community, we're not doing right by maintaining that part of the property, the civic part of actually having an egress in front of that house and at that corner, and it's become very dangerous. So I have concerns about that, and I realize that's sort of outside the issue of what goes on here, but I'm wondering how we're going to resolve all of that. I'm really curious if anybody knows how many actual parking spots there are available on that block of Birch. Does anybody know? Is it 2, 1?
Along Birch?
Yeah, along the Birch side. Do you know? I'm sorry.
I will take a question from the board chair.
Oh.
Address the question to me.
The question is, how many parking spots are available on Birch on that block?
We have a response from the city, please.
On the north side of Birch, I believe there are probably at least 4 parking spaces.
On the
North of Illinois, and probably at least 4 or 6 on the south side of Illinois on Birch. It's only one street parking.
I think it's 6 going toward Leal, you mean?
Pardon?
You mean going toward Leal, the south side?
Yes.
I don't think it's 6. Yeah. Okay. Because as the owner, as Ms. Senoff pointed out, it's actually not safe to park your car on Illinois Street. Anybody who's lived there for a while will know not to do that because of the speed of people going by. And we haven't had a car totaled, but we had a car where the rearview mirror was just knocked off and somebody drove off with that. So not a good strategy. And most of us don't buy permits to park there because we don't we have off-street parking available, I think. So I think single family could be supportable, but I have a lot of concerns about the duplex and the approach and perhaps disingenuous request for owner occupied and use of garage as actual garage parking spot. So.
Any questions from the board? Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard in opposition to these applications? Hearing none. Does the applicant wish to respond to? Please come forward. You're still under oath, so just take a seat. No. direct comments to me. Oh, no, no. You have to speak to the board, not to the member of the
okay.
audience.
So to answer Evelyn's question, so I actually I don't live out of town. I actually live about a mile south of the current address. So I live on Raisin, Florida. So that's about a mile south of it. And my initial intent was not use the garage as a studio. It was actually using part of the building because the original building was already divided into two parts. So the original intent for the old house was to use one of the part of the house as my personal studio, but not the garage. So that was that's my intent. The other question that she had was how many parking spaces are along the Birch. So there's at least 4. So if you're going from Illinois to there's no parking to the corner. So from that toward the north side of the blocks to High Street, there is 5, either 4 or 5, because you can park one car like right by the house, and then another 3 or 4 by the north part of it. The only time that I ever seen a lot of car on the block was on a Sunday morning when people are going to church. There's a church 1 block north of the on High and Birch. So that's the only time that I actually seen people not able to find parking space along Birch. I hope that sort of answer her questions.
Question, go ahead.
So you don't intend to use the garage as a studio? You're going to use it to park a car in?
No, the car, because I live down, like as I said, I actually live somewhere close by. I mean, I intend to have the tenant if they decide to rent out. I mean, if I decide to rent out, or if I use one of the, one of the duplex I intend to build as my personal studio, the studio is going to be in the building, not in the garage. That sort of makes sense. I mean, that was the original intended use for the when I purchased the house.
Well, I think what we're looking at here is the 2 parking spots. Just because of the size and everything, one of them needs to be in the garage. And the way I'm looking at this, you'd need to park 1 car in the garage and then
And
1 car in the driveway in front of the garage.
Yes.
And that would be part of this whole proposal, I guess. So if you were going to use the garage any other purpose other than parking a car, I think we have a problem there.
Yeah, so that was what I was saying. The garage was not intended to be used as something else before. As I say, I was trying to use the building as a personal studio, not the garage. So that's what I'm trying to clarify.
So the plan is and always has been that the garage will be for a car.
Yeah, yeah. I
Are
think
you-
it's good for me?
Are you finished?
Yeah, I'm finished.
All right, thank you. Is there a rebuttal by the objectors? Mr. Come forward.
When I see in the proposal, I was very surprised to see in the proposal that it would be owner occupied. Because that was different than I thought than the conversation I'd had with Mr. Chen. So I guess that's like a question. He's not intending to live there. He's intending to only rent out one half, but then use the other for his studio. A whole half of a house is surprising to me. As he stated, he lives nearby, but at the other end of Wona. It doesn't sound to me like he's planning to live there. Is it still considered owner occupied if he uses it occasionally for a studio and only has income from one of the sides?
Can I respond to that? I don't think that's a condition of the property or these variances. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
A condition of these variances is not that it's owner occupied.
Correct. That's, yeah, the zoning ordinance is agnostic to that, so that should not be considered. And I believe, if I could clarify in the staff report, the reference to owner occupied was in reference to the existing house when they initially purchased it. Their plan was to occupy half of the existing house, but that was before the house was condemned, and then they had to go forward with new plans. So there's nothing in there stating an intent of owner occupied for the new building, but again, that's irrelevant.
Thank you.
Have you concluded your remarks?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Chen, the procedures allow you to make any final statement. Do you have anything additional, sir? You're not required to. All right, thank you. Is there any further discussion among the board? No, all right, then at this time, and even though we heard these applications as one, we have to vote on them separately, correct?
Correct, and our advice would be to vote on the conditional use permit first, since some of the variances are contingent upon that. So you certainly want to take the conditional use first and then vote on the variances.
So take
After that.
06 first?
Correct.
All right. Is there a motion made in regard to ZBA-2023-C-06?
Okay, I'd move that the zoning board of appeals approve the proposed conditional use in case ZBA 23C-6 based on the staff findings and the summary of findings in the staff report.
It's been moved. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
And we have roll call. Or any further discussion? I'm sorry. None. All right, now maybe we have roll call for that.
Okay, Mr. Roosh,
Yes.
Mr. Warmbrun,
Yes.
Mr. Welch,
Yes.
Ms. Chester, and Ms. McLaughlin.
Yes.
That motion is approved. Now, call ZBA-2023 now the major? No,
Major 03?
go to 03?
Or is it?
All right, now we call ZBA-2023-minimum-03. Is there a motion?
Excuse me, Chair, clarification, did you mean major 03 or min? You said min. Was that, oh, that was the one? Sorry, okay, good.
Is there a motion in regard to that?
Sure. I move that the zoning board of appeals move to approve the proposed minor variance in case ZBA-2023-MIN-03 based on the staff findings. I think that this is the one to allow a duplex. Is that correct?
This one is to reduce the front yard along Birch from 15 to 12 feet.
Oh, okay. Okay, that this is in conformance with other properties in the neighborhood. But I already said staff findings, right? Is that appropriate?
Correct, yeah, that's
Sorry.
sufficient, but we can add that second part, that's fine.
Great.
Point of order. Could we not go in the order that's listed on the agenda?
I thought you told us to do
I
this one.
thought they said go to this one. I was gonna go in the order they were listed, but
I would highly
I was
recommend
following
staying
the
with
staff.
that. Stay with the order of the agenda.
If you switch to that, then that is great and that is preferred. It is then not a vote on the actual variance. It is a vote to forward to city council with a recommendation of whatever. Because it's a major variance, you're not voting on it, you're recommending.
Right,
Oh.
but we're dealing with, I thought we were dealing with,
I had said the minimum one, because I
The
thought that's the
minimum.
one we were supposed to
Correct,
do.
that is the one that was called.
But
So let's close that out.
but the request is to do the major 03, is that correct?
I don't think it actually matters at this point.
Oh, I would stay with the order of the agenda.
all right, then, strike that. I'm now then asked, is there any motion for ZBA dash 2023 dash major dash 03?
Yeah, I move that the zoning board recommend approval to the city council ZBA-2023-MAJ-03 based on staff findings and its conformity with the essential character of the existing neighborhood.
Second.
Motion now has been seconded, and before we call this one for vote, this has to be approved by 2/3 of the members of the zoning board of appeals for it to be forwarded on to the city council. So may we have a roll call, please?
We may.
I'm sorry, is there any discussion? Hearing none, may we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Welch,
Yes.
Ms. Chester, Ms. McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mr. Roosh,
Yes.
and Mr. Wormbrun.
Yes.
That motion carries by the necessary required vote and will be forwarded on to the city council at what meeting?
We'll let you know in a second, since we've got other major variances to talk about, and we can
Oh.
move on.
Do the next one, aye.
Yes, please.
At this time, then, we entertain ZBA-2023-major-04.
I move that we approve, forward on to city council, sorry, got mixed up on my page here. Case ZBA dash 2023 dash major dash 04 with a recommendation to approve the variances with, based on the findings outlined in the memo, the staff report, the staff summary.
It's been moved. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Is there any discussion amongst the board?
I'll just state for the record that I think increased density is appropriate in this area, given the location and giving the good accessibility to walking, biking, and transit in the area, as well as conformity with surrounding properties.
And I'd like to state for the record that I live 2 blocks away. I've never seen a lack of parking on Illinois Street. I park my car on Illinois Street with a parking permit many, many nights, and only had one problem, really. So it's while Illinois Street can be a thoroughfare, the fact that there's also 4 parkings on Birch and then an additional 4 to 6 parkings if you go past High Street towards Green Street, I think there's sufficient parking.
Any further discussion? May we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Ms. Chester, Ms. McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mr. Roosh,
Yes.
Mr. Wormbrun,
Yes.
and Mr. Welch.
Yes, that motion carries by the necessary requirements for forwarding on to the city council
At January 16th, 2024.
at their January 16th
Correct.
meeting. And this time then, call it ZBA-2023-minimum-03.
I'll move that we approve a ZBA 2023 minor dash 03 as outlined and based on the summary of findings in the staff report.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion of this motion? Hearing none, we have roll call, please.
Mr. Roosh,
Yes.
Mr. Wormbrun,
Yes.
Mr. Welch,
Yes,
Ms. Chester, Ms. McLaughlin.
Yes.
that concludes the applications related to 312 West Illinois Street. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a point of order regarding the minutes.
Yes?
The minutes were not specifically listed on the agenda and were not included in the packet on the website. Therefore, nothing was approved as minutes in this meeting. The minutes will be listed on the next meeting agenda and will be included in the next packet for approval by the board.
Thank you. Do we have any unfinished business?
We do not.
Do we have any new business?
There is none.
Do we have any public input? Please come forward.
My name is Joanne Buddy, and I'm here regarding case number ZBA 2023-C-05 regarding the self-storage facility at 205 North High Cross Road. The only logical and legal action for you to take is to rescind your motion from November 15th to reopen the case, and instead insert your findings of fact from October 18th for your denial into the record. Here's why. This process has been flawed from the beginning, and it looks like everyone is making up rules as they go along. I realize it's very unusual for this board to have disagreements on how to vote, so I'm sure this is all new ground for you. We, the homeowners of Behringer Commons, were never told about a petition. Even when we directly asked the staff how to stop this development, they told us it had already been approved, so there was nothing we could do. It had not been approved by this board. We were told at the October meeting that because we didn't have a valid protest in the form of a petition, the vote only needed a simple majority, but it didn't even pass with a simple majority. At the first meeting, the chair voted against the permit, saying there was a lot of public input against it. Now, after way more public input and a valid protest of over 60% of the homeowners living within 250 feet, the chair changed his vote. So it would appear that the more public protest against this proposal, the less it's considered in your decision. And you chose to ignore one of your own board members who used to be the county tax assessor when she told you she believed this would affect our property values. All that needed to happen at that first meeting was for the staff to ask the board, what are your reasons for the denial for the record? That never happened. That happened tonight on the first vote you took tonight. After you took the vote, or as you were taking the vote, the staff said, please state your reasons for the denial or for the approval. That's what should have happened October 18th, but it didn't. So Mr. Taylor tried to appeal and maybe even sue the city, so the city attorney recommended a reconsideration of the case in November. He was wrong. A reconsideration can only happen at the same meeting where the vote was originally taken. So at the November meeting, a board member moved to reopen the case. That was also wrong because it seemed to go in the city's favor. The city attorney failed to mention that to reopen a case, you need new evidence that has come to light. There was no new evidence presented before during the November 15th meeting. It did not qualify to be reopened. It was, in essence, a reconsideration, which was also invalid. Anyway, you reopened the case, you voted again on the permit. Because we had a valid protest, you needed a 2/3 vote for approval. You had 4 yeses, 2 abstentions, and 1 no. When asked what to do with the abstentions, the city attorney was wrong again and said they counted with majority, so you counted it as 6 yeses and 1 no and approved the motion. In the city council, abstentions can count with a majority at the direction of the mayor, but no such provision is in the ZBA bylaws or Robert's Rules of Order specifically says they do not count as either yes or no votes. So what you entered into the record on December 13th was wrong and invalid. At the end of the meeting, I informed you all and the applicant that we would be appealing the decision. I notified you all the same night the vote was invalid because I didn't want the applicant to proceed with finalizing the purchase of the land or ordering storage units and having a case against the city for damages. The mayor told me last Friday that the city attorney was going to issue a letter regarding the situation early this week. We have heard nothing. Has there been a letter? Has there been anything coming out from staff or the attorney? Your decision is not irreversible. Nothing has been built yet, and no permit should have been issued yet because the staff in their recommendation of this permit says that before a permit can be issued, stormwater, lighting, and building plans have to be reviewed for code compliance, and the applicant will be required by the Land Development Code to go through with the minor development process. That could not have happened prior to the notice we gave that the vote to approve this was invalid. In addition, we've made several FOIA requests asking for information, and what we've received has been useless and information we already had. We've asked repeatedly for the information we requested, which was all communication between the staff and the applicant and his attorney, and we don't have it, and I don't know if there's something they don't want us to see. So once again, the only logical and legal action for you to take is to rescind your motion from November 15th to reopen the case, and instead insert your findings of fact for your denial into the record of the October meeting where you denied the motion. Thank you. Can I ask if there has been anything put out by the city attorney or staff regarding your invalid vote last week?
No, we're not taking questions.
So we did receive, a letter did go out today to the board and to the council, and if you are able to give your email address to the staff, they can send that to you.
So a letter was coming out today?
Yes.
Make a request to the staff that we include that. I believe my microphone is on. Okay, it's not reaching. I did receive a communication today, I think it was today, forwarded by staff from the city attorney. Could I request that that be included in the minutes of this meeting?
Sure.
When it's publicly distributed? Thank you.
Okay.
Does that mean we can't get the letter until the minutes for next meeting? Or
So another point of order, this is not something on the agenda. We are taking public comment right now. And like I said, we've just received this ourselves. If you give your email address to the staff, we're more than happy to provide that.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional public input? Hearing none, is there a staff report?
There is not.
Study session?
No study session.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
At some point here, I'd like to initiate some sort of a request to review the bylaws of this board, which we're supposed to do every 2 years. I don't think we've done it.
Correct. That's already in the works. We've been having staff conversations about that, so I appreciate that. That will be forthcoming soon.
And then the procedure to follow that is you'll bring us something, we'll discuss it, and then wait another meeting to vote on it.
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, one other thing. These conditional use permit applications, are they different for a business than they are for residents?
No.
Have we initiated a new one where the storage units got ahead of the other case that we had tonight for the conditional use? Because once again, is what I talked about last time, this thing of need. I never really saw anything that was really need for conditional use. But here with the warehouse, you guys, you have a thing where you say, in other words, and you break down the technical language into language that regular people and us can understand.
Right, I'll take
But-
credit for making that bad word choice there. So we can clean that up, because I was just trying to put it into words that people could understand, and that was a poor word choice. So we can clean up the application.
Would all of them be like this then, with your explanation? Because the other one that we had on the duplex didn't have that information on it.
We'll take a look.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, then, wish everyone happy holiday, and we are adjourned.
Adjourned at 8:41 PM.